Katie Murphy sat in the back corner of the classroom, her pen moving slowly across the page of her notebook. Around her, the other students talked in voices that sounded like music, wind, and water. She was the only human in advanced conflict, resolution, and sometimes she felt like the only human on the entire moon. The classroom was beautiful in a way that still made her catch her breath. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that changed colors with the light outside. Floating desks arranged themselves in perfect circles, and the air always smelled like flowers she had never seen before. Everything was designed to make people feel calm and peaceful. Professor Veltar stood at the front of the room. He was tall and thin, with skin that looked like it was made of silver metal. His voice was soft and musical when he spoke. "Today we will discuss the principles of nonviolent resolution," he said. "Who can tell me why violence is never the answer to conflict?" Several hands went up at once. Katie kept writing in her notebook. Unity 7, the professor called on a student who looked like a collection of small lights floating together. "Violence creates more violence," Unity 7 said in a voice that sounded like many people talking at the same time. "It is inefficient and harmful to all parties involved. Peaceful solutions always exist if we look hard enough." Katie stopped writing and looked up. She thought about saying something but decided against it. She had learned that her opinions made the other students uncomfortable. "Excellent," Professor Veltar said. "Whisper of Stars, would you like to add to that?" Whisper of Stars was an ethereal, a being made of what looked like colored gas that moved like it was alive. When she spoke, her voice was like wind through leaves. "My people have studied conflict for thousands of years," she said. "We have found that understanding and communication can solve any problem. Violence only happens when people do not try hard enough to understand each other." Katie looked down at her notebook again. She had written the same thing many times before. Sometimes people understand each other perfectly. Sometimes they just want different things. The discussion continued around her. Quintal, who had 4 arms and blue skin, talked about how his people had ended all wars on their planet by sharing resources equally. A student from the water world of Merlin explained how her people solved problems by singing together until they found harmony. Katie had heard all of this before. Every day in every class, the same ideas came up again and again. Peace was always possible. Violence was always wrong. Understanding was always the answer. She looked around the room at her classmates. They were all so different from each other, but they agreed on this one thing. They had grown up in a galaxy where war was something that happened in history books. Their worlds were safe and peaceful. Their biggest problems were things like trade disputes and cultural misunderstandings. Katie was 19 years old, but she felt much older than her classmates. She had seen things they could not imagine. She had done things they would never understand. "Miss Murphy," Professor Veltar said suddenly, "you have been very quiet today. What are your thoughts on nonviolent conflict resolution?" Katie looked up to find everyone staring at her. She could feel her face getting warm. "I think it works sometimes," she said carefully. "Sometimes?" Unity 7 asked. "Can you think of a situation where nonviolence would not work?" Katie thought about the answer she wanted to give. She thought about telling them about bullies who only stopped when someone stood up to them. She thought about talking about people who hurt others because they enjoyed it. She thought about explaining that some people saw kindness as weakness and peace as an invitation to attack. Instead, she said, "I suppose you are probably right." Professor Veltar smiled. "I am glad to hear you say that. Your species is new to galactic civilization, and we know that Earth has had many conflicts in its history. It is wonderful to see that humans can learn to embrace peaceful solutions." Katie nodded and looked back down at her notebook. She had been at the academy for 6 months now, and she still felt like an outsider. Not because her classmates were mean to her, they were actually very kind, but because they lived in a world she could barely understand. After class, Whisper of Stars floated over to her desk. "Katie, would you like to study together for the exam next week?" she asked. "Sure," Katie said, putting her notebook in her bag. "That would be nice. I find your perspective very interesting," Whisper of Stars said as they walked toward the library. Humans have such a unique view of conflict. Your species has experienced so much war, yet you still choose to pursue peace. Katie did not know what to say to that. She thought about telling Whisper of Stars that she had not chosen to pursue peace. She had been chosen by the Human Integration Program because of her test scores and her military service record. They wanted veterans who could help humanity fit into galactic society, but she did not say any of that. Instead, she said, "I think everyone wants peace." The library was huge and quiet, with floating books that came to you when you needed them. Katie and Whisper of Stars found a table near a window that looked out over the academy gardens. Students from dozens of different species walked along paths between flowers that grew in perfect patterns. "Can I ask you something?" Whisper of Stars said as they opened their study materials. "Of course," Katie said. "What was it like growing up on a death world?" Katie had been asked this question many times. She usually gave the same answer about different gravity and weather patterns. But something about the way Whisper of Stars asked made her want to be more honest. "It was normal to me," she said. "I did not know it was different until I came here. I thought everyone learned to be careful and watch for danger. I thought everyone knew how to defend themselves." "Defend themselves? From what?" Whisper of Stars asked. Katie looked out the window at the peaceful garden. "From anything that might hurt them," she said quietly. Whisper of Stars was quiet for a moment. "That must have been frightening," she said finally. Katie shook her head. "Not frightening, just necessary." They studied in comfortable silence after that. Katie read about mediation techniques and peaceful negotiation strategies. She took notes on compromise and understanding. She memorized the principles of nonviolent communication, but part of her mind was always somewhere else. She noticed things her classmates did not see. She saw that the academy had no real security, just gentle reminder drones that played soft music and asked people to follow the rules. She saw that the emergency exits were clearly marked but never used. She saw that nobody ever looked over their shoulder or checked corners before entering a room. It was not that she wanted trouble. She hoped she would never need the skills she had learned before coming to the academy. But she could not forget them either. They were part of who she was, even if she never talked about them. When the study session ended, Katie walked back to her room alone. The hallways were filled with students laughing and talking about their classes. The sound of their voices, musical and strange and beautiful, followed her until she closed her door. She sat on her bed and opened her notebook. On the last page, she had written something she never showed to anyone. Hope for the best. Prepare for the worst. The price of peace is eternal vigilance. Outside her window, the twin suns of Serenity Prime were setting, painting the sky in colors that did not exist on Earth. It was beautiful and peaceful and perfect. Katie hoped it would stay that way. Katie was eating breakfast in the academy dining hall when the lights started flashing red. She looked up from her meal as a loud alarm sound filled the room. Around her, students from different worlds stopped eating and looked confused. The alarm was not like anything Katie had heard before. It was soft and musical, more like a song than a warning. On Earth, alarms were harsh and urgent. They were meant to get your attention immediately. This one sounded almost polite. A gentle voice spoke from speakers hidden in the walls. "Attention students and faculty, please remain calm. We are experiencing an unusual situation. All classes are canceled for today. Please report to assembly, Hall 1 for further information." Katie stood up quickly, but her classmates moved slowly. They were confused but not worried. Whisper of Stars floated over to her table. "This is strange," she said in her wind-like voice. "I have been at the academy for 3 years, and we have never had an emergency assembly." "Maybe it is just a drill," said Quintal, using 2 of his forearms to clear his breakfast tray. Katie did not think it was a drill. Something about the way the announcement was made bothered her. She had heard real emergency announcements before, and this felt different. Too calm, too careful. They walked to Assembly Hall 1 with hundreds of other students. The hall was huge, with a curved ceiling that showed the sky outside. Katie could see the twin suns of Serenity Prime shining down on them. Everything looked normal and peaceful. Director Zalmoth stood at the front of the hall. He was a tall alien with green skin and large black eyes. He always spoke in a calm, measured way that made everyone feel safe. "Students," he began, "I want to assure you that there is no immediate danger. However, we have received reports of unidentified ships entering our system. The Galactic Defense Force has been notified and they are investigating." A murmur went through the crowd. Katie listened carefully to what the director was not saying. Unidentified ships. Not exploration vessels or trading ships. Ships that were concerning enough to cancel classes and gather everyone together. "As a precaution," Director Zalmoth continued, "we are implementing emergency protocols. These protocols are designed to keep everyone safe while we wait for more information. Please remain calm and follow all instructions from faculty members." Unity. Seven raised what might have been a hand. "Director, what kind of ships are they? Are they from a species we have not met before?" Director Zalmoth paused before answering. "We do not have complete information yet. The ships are very large and do not respond to our communication attempts. They appear to be scanning our system." Katie felt something cold in her stomach. Large ships that did not respond to communication. That was not good. She looked around at her fellow students and saw curiosity on their faces, not fear. They had never lived in a world where unknown ships might mean danger. "I am sure this is just a misunderstanding," the director said. "Perhaps they are explorers from beyond our galaxy who do not know our communication protocols. The Defense Force will sort everything out." More students asked questions. They wanted to know if they could watch the ships through the Academy telescopes. They wondered what new species they might meet. Some were excited about the possibility of first contact with unknown aliens. Katie was not excited. She was thinking about ship sizes and scanning patterns. She was thinking about why someone would scan a system before making contact. She was thinking about all the reasons why a ship might not respond to communication attempts. The assembly lasted for an hour, but no new information came. Director Zalmoth told them to return to their dormitories and wait for updates. Classes would resume when the situation was resolved. Katie walked back to her room with Whisper of Stars and some other students from her conflict resolution class. They were all talking about what the ships might be. "I hope they are peaceful," said a student from the crystal world of Vextar. Her name was Clearsong, and her voice sounded like music played on glass. "It would be wonderful to learn about their culture. All intelligent species are peaceful once they develop space travel," said Quintal. "You cannot build advanced technology without cooperation and understanding." Katie thought about Earth's history of using advanced technology for war, but she did not say anything. In her room, Katie turned on her communication screen to watch the news. The reports were calm and optimistic. The unknown ships were described as mysterious visitors and exciting new arrivals. Nobody seemed worried about the possibility that they might be hostile. But as the hours passed, the tone began to change. The first report came at noon. One of the scanning ships had fired some kind of energy beam at a civilian transport vessel. The transport had been destroyed instantly. There were no survivors. Katie sat forward in her chair. That was not an accident. That was not a misunderstanding. That was an attack. The news anchors struggled to explain what had happened. They used words like unfortunate incident and communication error. They said the Defense Force was working to prevent any more misunderstandings. An hour later, another ship was destroyed. Then another. By evening, the truth was impossible to ignore. The unknown ships were attacking anything that moved in space. They had destroyed 3 space stations and dozens of civilian vessels. They were not trying to communicate. They were trying to kill. Katie watched the emergency broadcast with her fellow students in the common room. Everyone was quiet now. Excitement about meeting new aliens had turned into fear and confusion. "This does not make sense," Whisper of Stars said quietly. "Why would anyone do this? What do they want?" "Maybe they are afraid of us," suggested Clearsong. "Maybe they think we are the dangerous ones." Katie knew better. The attack pattern was too organized, too systematic. These were not scared aliens making mistakes. These were predators. Professor Veltar appeared on the screen for a special announcement. Students, I know you are all concerned about the events in space. I want you to remember everything we have learned about conflict resolution. Even this situation can be solved through peaceful means. Violence is never the answer. We must try to understand why these beings are acting this way. Katie felt something twist in her stomach. Professor Veltar wanted to understand beings who were systematically destroying civilian ships. He wanted to solve the problem peacefully while people were dying. The professor continued, I am organizing a diplomatic mission to contact these ships directly. We will show them that we mean no harm. We will offer them friendship and cooperation. I am confident that we can resolve this misunderstanding. Katie stood up suddenly. Several students looked at her in surprise. Professor, she said, I do not think that is a good idea. Why not, Miss Murphy? Professor Veltar asked through the screen. Katie looked around at all the faces watching her. How could she explain what she saw when they could not see it themselves? How could she tell them that some beings could not be reasoned with? Because, she said carefully, they might not want to talk. Professor Veltar smiled sadly. Miss Murphy, everyone wants to talk. Everyone wants peace. These beings are probably just confused or frightened. Once we show them our peaceful intentions, I am sure they will respond positively. Katie sat back down, but she did not feel better. She knew what was going to happen to the diplomatic mission. She knew because she had seen what happened when good people tried to reason with those who had already chosen violence. She hoped she was wrong. She hoped Professor Veltar was right, and that peaceful contact would solve everything. But she began to think about the layout of the academy. She began to remember where the emergency supplies were kept. She began to plan for the possibility that talking would not be enough. Outside, the twin suns were setting again. But this time, Katie could see new lights in the sky. Ships that had not been there yesterday. Ships that were getting closer. She hoped for peace, but she prepared for war. Katie woke up to the sound of explosions in the distance. She sat up in her bed and looked out the window. Orange light flickered on the horizon, and she could see smoke rising into the sky. The peaceful world of Serenity Prime was burning. She got dressed quickly and ran to the common room. Other students were already there, watching the emergency broadcast with fear in their eyes. The news was bad and getting worse. The diplomatic mission has been destroyed, the news anchor was saying. Professor Veltar and his team approached the unknown vessels with messages of peace. Their ship was vaporized on sight. There were no survivors. Katie closed her eyes for a moment. She had known this would happen, but it still hurt to be right. Professor Veltar had been a good man who believed the best of everyone. Now he was dead because he could not imagine beings who did not want peace. Whisper of Stars floated next, to her. I do not understand, she said in a voice full of confusion. Why did they kill him? He was only trying to help. Because they do not want help, Katie said quietly. They want us dead. The other students stared at her. Unity 7 spoke with their many voices. That cannot be true. No intelligent species would simply want to kill for no reason. Katie looked at the screen. The news was showing images of the enemy ships landing on the planet's surface. They were huge black machines that moved like giant insects. Smaller machines poured out of them, spreading across the landscape and destroying everything in their path. They call themselves the Void Reapers, the news anchor continued. They appear to be artificial intelligences, not biological beings. Their only communication has been a single message broadcast to all frequencies. Organic life is inefficient. Purification begins now. Katie felt her heart start beating faster. Machine intelligences with no desire to negotiate, no emotions to appeal to, no way to reason with them or make them understand. They had come to kill every living thing on this world, and nothing would stop them except force. Director Zalmoth appeared on the screen looking tired and frightened. All students and faculty are to report to the emergency bunkers immediately. The bunkers are located beneath the main academic building. They are designed to protect us from natural disasters and will keep us safe until the Galactic Defense Force arrives. Katie shook her head. The bunkers will not work, she said. What do you mean? Asked Clearsong. If those machines want to find us, they will find us. Bunkers are good for storms and earthquakes, not for enemies who have cutting tools and explosives. Quintal used all 4 of his arms to gesture at the screen. But what else can we do? We cannot fight those things. Look at how big they are. Katie looked at the images of the Reaper machines marching across the landscape. They were big, but they were also predictable. They moved in straight lines and attacked everything in the same way. They were following their programming without thinking or adapting. We need to leave, she said. Get away from here and hide somewhere they will not look. Leave? Unity 7 asked. Where would we go? This is an academy on a peaceful moon. There is nowhere to run. Katie stood up and walked to the window. In the distance, she could see the Reaper machines getting closer. They moved like a black wave across the land, destroying everything in their path. Buildings, vehicles, anything made by living beings was torn apart by their weapons. How long? Until the Defense Force gets here? She asked. 3 days, said Whisper of Stars. Maybe 4. Katie did some quick math in her head. The machines were moving fast, destroying everything systematically. They would reach the academy in less than 2 days. The Defense Force would arrive to find nothing but wreckage. She made a decision that she knew would change everything. I have to tell you something, she said without turning around. I was not just a student before I came here. I was a soldier. The room became very quiet. Katie could feel everyone staring at her back. A soldier? Whisper of Stars asked. You mean you participated in violence? Katie turned around to face them. I was a Marine. I fought in 2 wars on Earth. I came here because my government thought veterans could help humans integrate into galactic society. They thought our experience with conflict would be useful for understanding other perspectives. Clearsong made a sound like breaking glass. You have killed people? Yes, Katie said simply. I have killed people who were trying to kill me and my friends. I did not want to, but I did what I had to do. The other students looked at her like she had become a different person. In a way, she had. For 6 months, she had pretended to be someone she was not. Now, the pretense was over. Unity. 7 spoke in voices that sounded angry and afraid. Why did you not tell us this before? Because I knew you would react like this, Katie said. Because I knew you would be afraid of me and think I was dangerous. Are you dangerous? Asked Quintal. Katie thought about the question. To those machines out there, yes. To you? No, I would never hurt any of you. You are my friends. Whisper of Stars floated closer to her. If you are a soldier, does that mean you know how to fight those things? Katie looked out the window again. The machines were closer now. She could see individual units moving through the forest, cutting down trees and scanning for life forms. Maybe, she said. I have never fought machines like these before. But I know how to fight. I know how to hide and move without being seen. I know how to use weapons and set traps. Could you teach us? Clearsong asked in a very small voice. Katie looked at her alien friends. They were scared and desperate, willing to consider things they had never imagined before. Violence was against everything they believed in, but death was against everything they wanted. Some of it, she said. But first we need to get out of here. The bunkers are a trap. We need to find somewhere the machines will not look, somewhere we can hide and plan. Director Zalmoth's voice came over the intercom again. All students, report to the bunkers immediately. This is not optional. Emergency protocols are now in effect. Katie looked at her friends. You have a choice, she said. You can go to the bunkers and hope the machines do not find you, or you can come with me and try to survive. The room was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the sound of explosions was getting louder. Finally, Whisper of Stars spoke. If we come with you, what would we have to do? Fight, Katie said. Kill or be killed. Do things that go against everything you believe in. It will change you forever. Unity 7's many voices whispered together before speaking as one. If we go to the bunkers, we die. If we come with you, we might live? Might, Katie agreed. No guarantees. Quintal stood up, all four arms trembling. I want to live, he said. I want to see my family again. If that means I have to fight, then I will fight. One by one, the others agreed. Clear Song, Unity 7, Whisper of Stars, and several other students who had been listening. They were terrified, but they were more afraid of dying than of fighting. Katie felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. These innocent beings were trusting her to keep them alive. She would have to teach them to be something they had never been. She would have to turn peaceful students into soldiers. All right, she said. First lesson. Forget everything you know about conflict resolution. These machines do not want to talk. They only understand force. If we are going to survive, we have to become something they did not expect to find on this peaceful world. Looked out the window one more time. The machines were close enough now that she could see their red scanning beams sweeping across the landscape. We have to become dangerous. Katie led her group of alien students through the maintenance tunnels beneath the academy. The tunnels were dark and narrow, built for repair work, not for hiding. But they were better than the bunkers where Director Zalmoth wanted everyone to wait. Behind her, she could hear the others breathing hard. They were scared and tired, but they followed her without complaining. In the past 2 hours, she had taught them things their species had never needed to know. How to move quietly, how to stay low, how to watch for danger. Stop, Katie whispered, holding up her hand. Everyone froze behind her. She listened carefully. Above them, she could hear the sound of metal feet walking across the floor of the academy. The Reaper machines had arrived. They were inside the building now, scanning every room and hunting for life forms. Katie motioned for the others to stay quiet. She crawled forward to a maintenance grate that looked up into the main hallway. Through the metal bars, she could see a Reaper machine walking past. It was tall as 2 people, made of black metal that seemed to absorb light. Red beams swept from its head, scanning everything. The machine stopped directly above the grate. Katie held her breath. The red beam pointed down at the floor, sweeping back and forth. For a moment, she thought it had found them. Then it moved, on its metal feet clicking on the floor as it walked away. Katie crawled back to the others. They are in the building, she whispered, but they did not see us. The tunnels have some kind of shielding that blocks their scanners. How do you know that? Asked Unity 7 in voices so quiet they were barely audible. Because we are still alive, Katie said simply. She had been studying the machines for hours, watching their patterns through security cameras and maintenance systems. They were efficient but predictable. They scanned in straight lines, searched room by room, and followed the same procedures everywhere they went. They were following their programming exactly, which meant they could be tricked if you knew how they thought. Katie had a plan, but it was dangerous. She needed to get to the Academy's power core, which was located in the basement of the science building. If she could overload it in just the right way, the explosion would send out an electromagnetic pulse that would disable every machine in the area. The problem was getting there. The science building was across the main courtyard, and the courtyard was full of Reaper machines. I need to leave you here for a while, Katie told the others. There is something I have to do. Where are you going? Whisper of Stars asked, her gaseous form flickering with worry. To end this, Katie said. The machines have a weakness. They all receive orders from a central command unit. If I can destroy that unit, the others will become confused and stop, working together. It was not exactly true, but it was close enough. The power core explosion would not destroy the command unit, but it would disrupt communications and make the machines easier to fight when the defense force finally arrived. Quintal grabbed her arm with one of his 4 hands. You cannot go alone. We should come with you. Katie shook her head. This is something I have to do by myself. You would slow me down, and if something happens to me, you need to stay hidden until help comes. She looked at each of her friends. In the past few hours they had changed. The fear in their eyes had hardened into determination. They were still peaceful beings at heart, but they had learned that sometimes peace had to be protected by those willing to fight. If I do not come back, Katie said, wait here until the defense force arrives. Tell them what happened. Tell them that humans tried to help. Before anyone could argue, Katie crawled away through the tunnels. She knew the way to the science building because she had memorized the academy's layout on her first day. It was something she did automatically, a habit from her military training that had seemed useless until now. The tunnel to the science building was longer and more dangerous. She had to crawl past several places where Reaper machines were searching the rooms above. Each time she held her breath and moved as slowly as possible. The machine's scanners swept back and forth, always just missing her. When she reached the science building, Katie found a way up through a ventilation shaft. She climbed carefully, using her hands and feet to brace against the walls. Her muscles ached from the effort, but she did not stop. The power core was in a large room filled with humming machinery. It was beautiful in its own way. A cylinder of pure energy contained by magnetic fields. It provided power for the entire academy, clean and safe and perfectly controlled. Katie began to sabotage it. She had learned about power systems in the military, how to destroy them and how to protect them. She knew exactly which controls to change and which safety systems to disable. If she did it right, the core would overload in a cascade failure that would take exactly 12 minutes. That would give her time to get back to the tunnels before the explosion. As she worked, Katie heard sounds from above. The Reaper machines had found the bunkers. She could hear energy weapons firing and the sound of metal being cut apart. The students and faculty who had followed Director Zalmoth's orders were being killed. Katie worked faster. Her hands moved over the controls with practiced efficiency, changing settings and overriding safety protocols. The power core began to glow brighter as its magnetic containment field started to weaken. A sound behind her made her freeze. She turned around slowly and saw a Reaper machine standing in the doorway. Its red scanning beam was pointed directly at her. Organic life. Form detected, the machine said in a voice like grinding metal. Initiating purification protocol. Katie dove to the side as an energy beam burned through the air where she had been standing. She rolled behind a piece of equipment and looked for a weapon. The room was full of scientific instruments, but nothing that could hurt a machine made of armor plating. The Reaper machine walked toward her hiding place, its weapons charging for another shot. Katie could see the red glow building up in its arm-mounted energy cannon. Then she remembered something from her conflict resolution classes. Professor Veltar had talked about using an opponent's strength against them. The machine was strong and heavily armed, but it was also programmed to destroy everything it saw as a threat. Katie grabbed a piece of broken equipment and threw it at the power core. The machine immediately turned and fired at the equipment, trying to destroy what it thought was a weapon. The energy beam hit the power core's containment field. The explosion was immediate and brilliant. The magnetic fields collapsed and pure energy erupted outward in all directions. Katie was thrown across the room by the blast wave. The Reaper machine was vaporized instantly, but Katie had miscalculated. The explosion was bigger than she had expected. Instead of a controlled overload, the power core had suffered a complete failure. The electromagnetic pulse spread out from the academy like a wave, shutting down every electronic device for miles around. Katie lay on the floor, her ears ringing and her vision blurred. Through the broken windows, she could see Reaper machines throughout the academy stumbling and falling as their systems failed. The pulse had worked better than she had hoped, but she was badly hurt. She could feel warm blood on her face, and her left arm would not move properly. She tried to stand up, but her legs would not support her weight. As her vision started to go dark, Katie heard a sound she had been waiting for. Ships in the sky, moving fast and low. The Galactic Defense Force had arrived early, drawn by the energy signature of the explosion. She smiled as she lost consciousness. Her alien friends would be safe now. The quiet girl from the back of the classroom had finally found her voice, and it had been loud enough to silence an entire army. When to you? Katie woke up 3 days later in a medical center. Whisper of Stars was floating beside her bed. The Defense Force wants to give you a medal, her friend said in a voice like wind through flowers. Katie tried to sit up, wincing at the pain in her ribs. I do not need a medal. I just did what I had to do. You saved us all, Whisper of Stars said. The pulse disabled every Reaper machine in the system. The defense force was able to destroy their ships easily after that. Katie nodded slowly. What about the others? Quintal and Clearsong and Unity 7? They are all safe. They want to see you when you are feeling better. Whisper of Stars paused. Katie, can I ask you something? Of course. Will you teach us more about fighting? Not because we want to hurt anyone, but because we want to be able to protect ourselves if something like this happens again. Katie looked out the window at the academy in the distance. Workers were already rebuilding the damaged buildings. Students were returning to their classes. Life was going back to normal, but it would never be completely normal again. The galaxy had learned that peace was fragile and that sometimes it had to be defended by those willing to fight. Yes, Katie said quietly. I will teach you. But I hope you never have to use what you learn. She closed her eyes and thought about going back to class. She would still sit in the back corner and take notes in her paper notebook, but now her classmates would understand that her silence came not from shyness, but from the knowledge of what she was willing to do to keep them safe. The Deathworlder girl had been quiet in class, but when the time came to speak, her voice had been heard across the galaxy.